So hi, everyone. As Victoria just mentioned, my name is Elena, and I'm a nurse navigator who works for the nonprofit Fort Worth Adolescent and Young Adult Oncology Coalition, and we call it FWAYA for short, for obvious reasons. It's a little long. um, so this presentation is geared towards patients and intended to provide resources on to that population. And if you happen to be a provider of some kind, a nurse, a social worker, welcome. I'm hoping we can maybe provide some, perspective, insight for your younger patients. If nothing else, you can maybe add to your resource list that you're able to provide to your folks. I appreciate you being here. So that being said, I kind of wanted to start with the title. Why did I choose Uncharted Waters, as corny as that may seem or sound? So I kind of struggled a little bit with naming this. I wanted to be intriguing but relatable. If you like to read books, there's a memoir written by an AYA called Between Two Kingdoms. At one point, the author, her name is Suleika Jawad, she describes the months in which she was dealing with her symptoms before being diagnosed as feeling as though she was, quote, at sea, close to sinking, grasping at anything that might buoy me. And she later refers to combating her intense fatigue by the motivational thought of stay afloat, stay afloat. And so I thought that was a feeling that you may be able to actually also relate to at diagnosis or shortly thereafter. You hear the three words, you have cancer, and there you are, you're plopped in the middle of a vast sea of uncertainty and fear, and you're just kind of treading water, trying to keep your head afloat so you don't get overwhelmed or lose it, or kind of lose what you're supposed to be doing. And so you're going to have good days and bad days, but hopefully some of this information will be helpful and you'll be able to have more good days than bad. And maybe we're going to move from the feeling of just barely getting by to I'm doing okay with this, and I can do this, I can handle this. So let's go ahead and get started. So the National Cancer Institute says or defines AYAs that as a patient who's diagnosed with cancer between the ages of 15 and 39 years old. So I want to make note here that don't get fixated on the adolescent part. Yes, we are talking about 15, 17, 16-year-olds, but also we're talking about 32-year-olds, 38-year-olds, 27-year-olds. I mean, it is a long time to talk about. There's a lot that happens between the ages of 15 and 39 for us as human beings. But remember, we're not just talking about our teenagers. We're also talking about the little bit of the older side of the spectrum. Just a little bit of statistics for you. There's about 90,000, almost 90,000 young adults that are diagnosed in the United States every year. And did you know that young adults are actually diagnosed 8 times more often than our pediatric cohorts? So that may be surprising. Those numbers may be surprising to you. They may not be, but just wanted to throw those out there. Next, I just kind of want to, what I'm calling normalize the heavy. Hopefully we're going to be doing a lot of normalizing for patients today. We want to be sure that you realize that what you're going through, what you're dealing with, all young adult patients deal with it to some extent, to some level, if not that exact thing, something like it. And so we want to normalize a lot of your experience, but let's first talk about normalizing the heavy. What does it mean to be a young adult patient diagnosed with cancer? So you have cancer, you're hearing that cancer word. It's devastating to anyone that hears it, obviously. Your first thoughts after shock might be, why me? Why me? That's a very common thing that I hear from patients. And so after a while, maybe it's a couple days, maybe it's a couple of weeks, you're still reeling. I can't tell you how many times I have patients that I'm talking to, and it's been maybe they're even on their second cycle of treatment, and they're still reeling from the diagnosis, or they're apologizing to me for being upset because they just heard they had cancer last week. And I always have to tell them, don't apologize to who you're venting to. Don't feel bad about crying, about being down, about being unable to concentrate or take joy in things you might have been able to in the past. This is a really hard diagnosis to receive for anyone, but it seems to impact our young adults a little bit differently, or a lot differently than our pediatric or elderly cohorts. And we're going to talk about why that is. So this slide is meant to represent, and I think it does that pretty well visually, kind of the chaos that is a normal, even normal young adulthood. All of these issues and milestones and social pressures that you're dealing with at this age range. I mean, it's crazy when you really think about it. I mean, where you're at developmentally is going to significantly impact how you deal with your diagnosis and the aftermath. Your age, which milestones you've accomplished, the milestones you haven't accomplished yet, your maturity level, your support system, whether it's your parents or a spouse, whether or not they're there or supportive, your best friends or your friends, your level of intelligence. All of these are different for each young adult. And so that's what makes individualized approaches really important in this age group. The level of mental and emotional impact can vary depending on what point of your life timeline you're at when you receive this diagnosis, right? That makes sense. We're talking to 15 to 39, like I said earlier, it's a long time span. There's a lot that can be happening that's going on at each different age, at each, for each different person. I mean, 15 to 17, we're talking high school, right? So some of you might be in high school. For the rest of us, do you remember high school? I mean, it was hard, right? There was lots of changes going on. There's a lot of emotional things happening. There's a lot of physical changes happening. And then the hard just changes as you age, right? Whether it's the high school challenges or it's the young adult challenges of careers and young families. These are all, things that we have to deal with as the patient, as the provider, thinking about your patient. And you can see some of these examples here. I won't go into all of them. We're going to talk about some of them later on in the presentation. But, these are just something to keep in mind. This is everything that's floating around in the young adults world, in your world. And this is why, don't feel bad about reeling from this. It's a matter of trying to get your balance and trying to figure out how to deal with it in the balance of everything else that's happening in your normal lifespan trajectory. That was currently going on before all this. So conflicting demands is really important to look at because there really is this kind of tug of war happening between where you want to be. You want to be normal. You want to be your old self. But you have your current situation, which is your cancer diagnosis, pulling you into the reality of what you are now dealing with, right? So your normal life demands intimacy. You're finding at this age group or in these age range, you're finding your life partner potentially. You're dealing with you figuring out your social circle, who are your most trustworthy friends, or so you think, right? And then you have isolation once you get diagnosed. Like I said, the why me is a very common initial thought that may happen throughout the process. You're not necessarily seeing other young adults at your doctor's appointments or when you go to the hospital, and it can feel very much so like, none of your friends are dealing with it either. So nobody really gets it. And that's a really important thing to remember as for providers as well as patients. That's kind of setting the basis for your emotional health, is that initial feeling, that feeling of isolation. And so we always need to keep that in mind. Invulnerability. So normally you would be, just carrying on with your normal life. You're not necessarily thinking about the fact that you're going to die one day. You're not necessarily thinking that, if you get a cold, that it's something super serious. It's a cold. It is what it is, right? And then all of a sudden you're dealing with this intense vulnerability. Now you're facing your mortality potentially, or you're thinking about death now because you heard the C word, right? You are now dealing with the fact that you're going to be not necessarily your strongest or feeling your best. How many young adults actually have a primary care physician set up, right? I mean, I think it took my sister until she was 28 before she found her primary care physician and got that all set up. And that was with me telling her, hey, you should probably do that. So it's just, young adults aren't thinking that they need that. Independence. So, at different points in time, you're talking about different kinds and levels of independence, right? So for your 16-year-old, maybe it's because you just learned how to drive and now you have that new kind of freedom, if you will. Maybe you're a little bit older and you just moved out because you started college. And then you're all of a sudden getting diagnosed and having to refigure that all out. Maybe you have to move back in with your parents now because you can't afford your own house at this point. Maybe it's physical. Maybe you can't do the same things you used to be able to do for yourself, and your husband now has to help you in more ways than he used to. Maybe you can't even get up to go to the bathroom, and that's a big adjustment, and so that can mentally impact you. control and uncertainty and loss of control. So you're normally going to be going about your life. You for the most part have control of what you're doing and where you're going. And then you're thrown into this, you have this appointment and that appointment, and you have to be at this thing, and you have to be there at this time. And you have to take this medication. You have to take it at this time. You have to be here for chemo on this day. And so that loss of control is really felt pretty heavily by young adults. And sometimes we'll see them act that out. Sometimes young adults, you guys, you're in treatment and you're just tired of being told what to do all the time. And you're sometimes that comes out with frustration or anger, or you withdraw. And that's okay. It's the staff's responsibility to kind of figure out, how do we help you become a part of your care and part of the care decision-making process in your care, so that you can, feel more of a sense of control. And that really does help you guys mentally deal with everything. So let's talk a little bit about who's who. Who are those people that are throwing out your lifesavers, if you will? And so kind of an introduction to your healthcare team, because I don't feel like we do a great job of providing that to you right off the bat, right? You may find out who people are as you go through treatment. You may have to ask for it. A lot of patients tell me they don't know who to ask or what to ask or where to find people. And so this is kind of the point of this section, is to kind of talk a little bit about those really important people. Social workers, for example, are going to be a great member of your care team. So definitionally, they assist with social and emotional issues that arise. What that means is, or translating that, they can help you find resources in your facility of treatment or in your community. They can help navigate health insurance for you. They can run and support an educational group, so they can either help educate patients, help educate caregivers and loved ones, and they can actually run support groups too. So they're really important members of the care team. As a nurse navigator, I refer to social workers all the time, and I really do need their help a lot of times, because they have so much more knowledge of, government assistance and some of these government programs for insurance. And so just a really important member of your care team. And you as the patient may have to ask your nurse about, where is my social worker? Is there one at this office? How do I get in touch with one? So don't be afraid to ask your care team about these folks and how to get connected. Child life specialists are also really important people. They provide developmentally appropriate psychosocial support for patients and families. And so what that means is they're really kind of experts at, they are experts at kind of delving in and finding out for each age group, depending on your age, what are the coping tools? What are some techniques for learning? What is the appropriate language? All depending on the age of that child or that patient, and helping you kind of like we say here, provide emotional support and therapeutic activities that are appropriate for your age, providing access to recreational activities and programs. So making sure you know about social opportunities or know about recreational activities that could potentially get you out of your room or get you out of the house. Preparing for procedures or treatment by teaching coping skills, which I think is really cool. So I've seen them teach, a kid about what a port is and showing them ports on a doll. So it's not such a scary thing when their mommy has a little bump sticking out of her chest that, may or may not be accessed at home. They're just so great. Not to just say they just work with your kiddos. If you have young children, they can also work with the patient. So don't be afraid to ask to speak to a child life specialist. Maybe you're having a high anxiety regarding procedures. These professionals can come in and speak to you personally, one-on-one, figure out what it is that you're nervous about with that procedure, and kind of help teach you some coping skills that you may not have thought you even could help, that you might not even know could have helped. And so I encourage you to find out where these professionals might be and if you have access to them. Usually they do work in hospitals. And we'll talk about later what FWAYA hopes to provide in the future, near future, and go from there. But I do encourage you to ask for these folks, especially if you have young children. They can talk to you on the phone even about and guide you about how to talk to your kids about the diagnosis or about procedures or about the cancer, if you're struggling in the area or if your kiddos are struggling. Nurses obviously you're going to meet all kinds of nurses that do all kinds of things for you. And so I thought it was important to kind of talk through some of those because it can, obviously from diagnosis, even to just your first treatment of whatever that is, chemo, radiation, you're going to meet so many different people. And a couple of those people might be nurses, if not more than a couple. So these are some of the roles, just some of the roles that nurses can take on when you're meeting them in this kind of a setting. So care coordinators or case managers, they can help bridge gaps in your care when you're in the hospital or when you're transitioning from the hospital to the home. And they can help you obtain medical supplies or certain prescriptions. So they're really important in kind of helping coordinate that transition from home to, or from hospital to home. And they are also well versed with the multidisciplinary team at the hospital with some of those insurance issues that come up when it comes to home health and things like that. So you'll probably be meeting one of those if you end up staying in the hospital at any point in time. A nurse navigator is someone who's going to help answer questions or concerns that come up during treatment, potentially communicate with the medical team on your behalf, your concerns, your questions, advocate for you, provide additional resources through their network in the community. So they may obviously know within other facilities or within the community of places or people that you can go to, in regards to the specific needs that you communicate to them. So they're a great resource as well. There will also more than likely be a nurse at your doctor's office who works directly with your doctor and will be helping your doctor and you with coordinating care and appointments at your doctor's office, whether it's chemo appointments, like infusion appointments, getting transfusion appointments outside of the office, appointments just to see the doctor, extra appointments to come in and see the doctor because you're having complications or trouble. So they're really going to be a point of contact for questions and concerns that come up between doctors' visits, whether it's, like clinical things like dealing with side effects or just, formalities of I need another appointment or I think I should get an appointment to talk about this. And then at your doctor's office also may be where you get your infusions as well. So you'll meet an additional nurse there who will be your infusion nurse who takes care of you while you're getting your medications in the office if you're doing outpatient treatment or anything of the nature. Bedside nurses in the hospital, that's kind of self-explanatory, but basically that's going to be the nurse that's providing care, education, medications to while you're staying in the hospital, right? They're coordinating with the multidisciplinary team to ensure your treatment plan is being followed. And they're also going to be, all nurses are advocates for their patients. All nurses are going to be able to help educate and answer questions. They're all on your side, and they should be somebody that you reach out to potentially first if you don't know where to find some of these other folks. And so I encourage you to do that. They're there for you. And I know that through your whole treatment process, you're going to get to know some of these nurses very well. And so I encourage you to trust them, or at least try to learn to trust them over time, and utilize them and ask them questions. They can point you to the right people. Doctors, this seems really self-explanatory and like duh, but oftentimes young adults who don't have a lot of experience with the medical world prior to their diagnosis, they're not familiar with the whole process, right? They don't necessarily realize that they're going to be getting maybe more than one doctor. So you have your medical oncologist who's going to be kind of overseeing your cancer care, your treatment. Your radiation oncologist, if you needed radiation treatments, he or she will be the one that oversees that part. And they'll have a whole separate staff, probably an additional nurse there. And that'll be somebody that works with your medical oncologist, and they will talk and speak regarding your care. Also, they may have to loop in a surgical oncologist. So that's somebody who specializes who's obviously a surgeon, but also specializes in the oncology piece and will be more familiar with removing solid tumors and things like that. And then of course, there are specialists that may come up along the way. If you're admitted for any kind of complication of treatment, or you have a new health issue because of treatment or because of your diagnosis, then they loop in some specialists. For example, if you end up having, like a lung issue, they may have to consult with a pulmonologist. If you end up having issues with your stomach or your liver because of treatment or your diagnosis, then they might bring in a GI specialist or a hepatologist. And so just keep in mind that your care team is not necessarily going to stay the same size the whole time. It may flex and grow and get smaller again. And, you know, it's all just meant to take care of you as the whole, as your whole body, and make sure that we're addressing every need that you do, and looping in specialists when they need to ensures that the doctors that know the most about that area are taking care of you too. And then hopefully, of course, they're communicating together and at least helping you see like the bigger picture of everything, right? So last but not least, for sure, these are other important members of your care team that you may meet along the way that I thought I would mention and discuss here. Physical and occupational therapy, by far very important, right? Because as a young adult, you want to maintain as much function as possible through your treatment, whether it means that you're getting weak from treatment or your diagnosis, whether it means that, you know, you have a particularly hard hospital stay and you're having trouble bouncing back. You have a surgical procedure and you're having trouble recovering, you know, your muscles or your muscle use after that. Physical and occupational therapy is such a big key player. Another people that talk with the multidisciplinary team when you're in the hospital. You can also potentially be set up with physical therapy outpatient. We have a really great local program called Revital that specializes in working with oncology patients. And so I encourage you to ask if you're having trouble with function of any kind, whether it be, you know, I used to be able to, you know, run 5 miles and now I can't even, you know, go to the bathroom without getting short of breath. Maybe talk to your physician about, we're going to talk about fitness and exercise later, but physical therapy might be something that you can look into with your provider. Chaplains are obviously there to take care of your spiritual health. That is somebody, a chaplain is somebody that's going to be at the hospital. But of course, if you go to church outside of the hospital, don't forget about reaching out to your church for support. And oftentimes they're more than willing to be a community for you and come together and help however they can, at least from what I've heard from patients when they talk about working with their churches or talking to their churches after diagnosis. And so if that's something that's a big part of your life, I encourage you to keep it a big part of your life if you can. Dietitians, that's kind of self-explanatory, right? You're potentially going to be having to address maybe weight gain, weight loss. How do I keep weight on? You know, how do I do healthy calories? How do I do enough calories when my taste buds have changed and I don't like food anymore, or I don't like certain kinds of food? Dietitians are there and they're meant to help guide you in that process. And it's something that your provider can refer you to. Psychologists and counselors are, you know, obviously there for therapy reasons. Listed them separately because obviously not all counselors are psychologists, but the same kind of job that they're going to be doing for you, which is help you out and help you take care of your emotional support or emotional health. I'm sorry. So I wanted to mention this next person or people because they can be labeled differently depending on facility, organization you're talking about. I've heard it called at least these three, but there's probably more variations. So you could see a financial counselor, a financial navigator, or a financial advocate, and their role and what they can help you with may differ depending again on what their title is or what the facility, you know, the facility that you're seeing this person at. But generally speaking, they're there to help you potentially navigate your bills, help with insurance questions or, you know, government program questions. They're just a huge key part. If you have access to one, I encourage you to reach out and utilize those as well. And last but not least, I love these folks, are lay patient navigators. So if you're lucky enough to have any of these folks on your team, they function similarly to a nurse navigator, but they are not nurses. So they're not necessarily doing medical education, but they're doing, or clinical education, but they're doing education on what resources are available. They're supporting you emotionally, and they're there to help with navigating your care team as well. Some of them are even survivors of cancer, and so they have a really unique and helpful insight and perspective that you should really be able to tap into. And so, like I said, these are all potentially people that you have access to, and I encourage you to reach out and find these people if you can. I mean, I kind of touched on this already, where you find all these folks. It can be in the hospital, at your doctor's office, or in the community. So now what are your buoys? Where are they? Talking a little bit more specifically about our resources. So the first topic I wanted to talk about is fertility preservation. Part of what I do for patients right now is to go to them wherever they are in the Fort Worth area and initiate this process if possible, educate on it, potentially coordinate with specialists to ensure that we address it before treatment begins if it's possible. And I'm not the only one that does this. You may have this conversation started by your provider, your oncologist. Your clinic nurse may ask you about this or talk to you about this. The nurse in the hospital, if you're inpatient, may talk to you about this, or a navigator may talk to you about this. The level of information that you get may vary depending on who's providing it, but they should always be able to potentially refer you to a specialist if time allows for it. My unique role allows for me to provide time for males to sperm bank while they're inpatient. So that's a really important thing to be able to provide, opportunity to be able to provide our male patients. Female patients, obviously the fertility preservation process is a little bit more involved. You're looking at 7 to 10 days of hormone injections and then a scheduled date for an egg retrieval through the reproductive endocrinologist specialist. And so that being said, the timing on it for our females is usually an issue that we have to try and coordinate with the medical oncologists and things like that, but still a very important topic that we talk about. When it comes to after therapy, when I say after therapy, I just want to reiterate that not everybody does have time or is able to address this before their treatment starts. And I want you to know it's not necessarily the end all of opportunities for a family. When I say refer to a specialist, we do have a couple people in particular I wanted to mention. So Moncrief Cancer Institute, who'll be mentioned quite a bit in this presentation, has a fertility preservation program that I work with closely. They have a wonderful physician assistant named Stephanie Lawrence, who works to educate you on your risk for infertility and works to educate you on the options that you may have, and also works really closely with the specialists in the community. And so if you're having any questions and you're female, male, and you have time to go see her, she is outpatient. She can actually also do phone consultations. So I keep that in mind when I'm talking to my patients. If they need a higher level of education than I can provide, because Stephanie really is more of a expert, she can talk to you more about, like I said, what level of risk we're looking at when you look at your particular chemo regimen, what we're talking about when it comes to the different kinds of fertility procedures that may be options later on down the road. The whole egg retrieval process, what does that procedure look like and what does it involve? And so I try to refer to her when timing allows for it. Also meant to mention here, Moncrief and Stephanie work really closely with the Rutledge Cancer Foundation to provide funding for young adults in Fort Worth. That is county specific, unfortunately, but I have listed some other potential financial resources here on the slide that you can see that are more of our national grants. And then just to kind of let you know, I used a big term a little bit ago and kind of stumbled on it because it's a little bit of a tongue twister, but reproductive endocrinologists are actually doctors that specialize in the diagnosis and treatment of infertility. And they're very familiar with the fact of cancer, people that have been diagnosed with cancer coming in and trying to preserve. And so this will not be like a weird thing for them, or it shouldn't be. They should be kind of familiar with why you're there, the different emotional impacts we're talking about, and the timeliness. They're usually really good at squeezing in our patients to see them quickly because of the fact that it's usually time sensitive. And so I just want to say that too. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about work. We'll go straight from diagnosis, and not all young adults have a job when they get diagnosed. But we need to talk a little bit about taking leave. As a young adult, you may never have taken leave from your work before because you're not necessarily a person who's been sick in the past. So this is all kind of also a new thing. It's a new world, more terminology. It's more another person you have to talk to, another phone call you have to make, another appointment you might have to make. So I just wanted to say at this point that you should be communicating with your boss, your leadership, communicating with your human resources department or your HR department, as we'll say it. They'll be able to help guide you. A lot of people, I have a job and I know hospital now, or I just got diagnosed. What the heck am I supposed to do now? You know, I have to do all these appointments, all these chemo treatments. I don't know how I'm going to feel. Just communicate with your boss. Let them know what's happening. Talk to your HR, let them know what's happening, and they'll be able to provide you with next steps and be able to help you out with some of this terminology also. So just really briefly, I wanted to define these generally anyway. So FMLA, Family and Medical Leave Act, is providing employees with up to 12 weeks of unpaid job protection leave per year. So it also requires that you, just so you know, maintain your group health benefits. So you're going to be actually paying your insurance premiums to continue your health benefits out of pocket because your salary is not currently in place, right? Keep in mind that you oftentimes, with a lot of employers, you'll have to be with them for at least a year before you're eligible for FMLA. So that's something that people don't always realize. And then long-term versus short-term disability. No, STD does not stand for sexually transmitted disease in this case. So disability insurance is a special type of insurance that protects your ability to earn a paycheck in the event that you experience a serious illness or injury. So you're usually going to receive a certain percentage of your salary for a certain amount of time. And that percentage and that amount of time varies depending on your benefits package, depending on your position or your job, depending on, you know, your salary. So there's a lot of factors in there, and it's a lot, like I said, it can be a lot and it can be overwhelming. So make sure you reach out to your HR. Your financial advisor or counselor, advocate may also be able to help. Your social worker may also be able to help answer questions. Your navigator may know some things. Ask everybody everything, you know, that's what they're there for. And a lot of times my AYA patients, I find they don't ask, they don't call. Please do. That's why these people are here. They're here to help you. Going back to work, it can cause a lot of anxiety, right? Not saying that everybody necessarily, like I said, is working at this point in time, but you may have experienced physical changes by the time you're going back. You may be worried about how people are going to react to your physical appearance, or you may be worried about yourself. How am I going to be able to perform at this point? I'm super tired, or I have this like crazy brain fog now where I can't remember things. So just, keep it in mind, there are resources out there to help you kind of work through all that. And remember, you are going to potentially be dealing with these side effects, fatigue, chemo brain. These are real things that patients experience and then have to adjust their work. You may have to take breaks at work that you didn't have to take before. If hopefully your leadership is, you're able to work with your leadership on that kind of thing. You may have to reread emails more than one time because you can't follow it as well as you may have been in the past. And not only are these changes happening and you have to be a little bit prepared for them, I want you to be prepared for them, because that frustration and annoyance that can come from the changes you're experiencing can impact your mental health. We're talking about things that greatly affect our confidence as young adults, our productivity, our contribution to society as a human being. If you're looking at our developmental milestones there, generativity versus stagnation, right? Our ability to provide for our families has been impacted potentially. So these are all really impactful, for our mental health. It's changed how we're functioning as a person, and it's changed our life really. So we are going to have to make adjustments. Young adults have to make adjustments, and we have to figure out how do we help? What are the interventions that I can do to help combat these? Another thing area I wanted to mention is looking for work. So unfortunately, sometimes we're either losing our job or, looking at resume writing, job placement resources, things like that. And I just want to mention Cancer and Careers. They're a really great website. They have resources for all this kind of stuff, and I encourage you to check them out. Financial aid, just speaking of losing your job, which a lot of patients unfortunately experience. I wanted to mention COBRA. And so COBRA is basically, sorry, I lost my place in my notes here. Basically, COBRA is what you're going to be paying for to help you get through, to keep your insurance if you happen to lose your job. A lot of patients then have their healthcare tied into their insurance, right? So you don't necessarily want to change insurances, or, oh, well, I'll just sign on to my spouse's insurance. And sure, but what if your providers aren't on your spouse's insurance? And so sometimes you find yourself in this really hard spot where you have to, unfortunately try and apply for COBRA. And then I will say that is not a cheap thing either, but it is an option out there for people, and it should be provided to you. Government programs that I'm not super familiar with, but that are out there. Obviously, a lot of people have heard of Medicaid, disability. There is actually a specific Medicaid for breast cancer and cervical cancer patients out there that you could be eligible for. Grants, I really just want to mention, pay attention to criteria for grants. Some of the grants are geared specifically towards young adults. Some of them are more diagnosis specific. Be prepared to show, if you have these 3 things prepared or uploaded, you're probably going to be ready for most grant applications. So like a proof of income, so maybe like a pay stub, proof of diagnosis. So that could look like a letterhead from your a letter from your doctor with the letterhead of your facility on there to make it official, right? And it's basically a letter from your doctor that says, yes, I'm taking care of so-and-so, and he does have such and such diagnosis. It could look like a copy of your face sheet. It could look like a copy of some of your medical record, maybe. So just be mindful of what you're sharing with people, though. You don't want to share anything unnecessarily like your social security number or things like that, but you may be required to show some of this. A copy of a bill. Sometimes when you reach out to the county for help with utility and things like that, they ask for your copy of your utility bill to show, like, this is what I would be paying. So keep that in mind. So deciphering bills, speaking of bills, pay attention to the phone numbers on your bills. If you do get paper bills, if you get electronic bills, there should be a phone number on there also at some point somewhere. And those are important numbers to take down in case you have questions on your bill. If you, like I say, before you stress too much, ask about financial aid, ask about payment plans. A lot of the hospitals will have options for that. And so don't, before you stress out too much, make sure that you're asking for all your options. And I just want to briefly mention that there are scholarships that being diagnosed as a young adult they're making you eligible for. Just to kind of briefly go into our local financial aid options, and this is obviously kind of more the Tarrant County side, but if you're to the east of us, mid-cities, Dallas, further on on the east side, please be aware that your social workers and navigators should be aware of what's available to you, and ask, like we say, ask them. Cancer care services can help with things like prescriptions costs. They can help with insurance premium reimbursement, and they can help with things like gas cards and things like that. Moncrief Cancer Institute, which is a nonprofit community-based early detection and support center and is part of UT Southwestern's Harold C. Simmons Comprehensive Cancer Center, also has a financial assistance program. They also have a social worker that's available to work with patients there. And like we mentioned earlier, they work with Rutledge Cancer Foundation for fertility preservation funding. Rutledge Cancer Foundation is a nonprofit, and basically it was founded in 2011 after Carly Rutledge was 15 years old and diagnosed with a stage 4 Ewing sarcoma. So they are young adult focused, and they work to help fund patient programs to help with emotional support needs and therapeutic needs. They've helped fund a lot of research for solid tumor research, and they just do a lot in our community for young adults. Like I said, you're going to hear these organizations multiple times, probably just because we work so closely with them here in Fort Worth, but also because they do a lot of different things for patients in different areas. So really important, obviously, as I've mentioned, is emotional support. I tell my patients all the time, it's really important not only to take care of your physical health, but also your mental health too. It's really important for your quality of life during treatment, during treatment and after treatment. And let's not forget our survivors who are off treatment. A lot of times they fall off the edge of the earth, and where do they find resources? Who do they ask for things? So I encourage you to keep talking to your treatment team, or keep those relationships with your social worker or your navigator, and they can help you even as a survivor find things. Sorry, pardon me. Take a drink of water here. I'm talking too much. So everyone's a little bit different when it comes to emotional support and what's helpful to them. I tell patients sometimes it's trial and error. You have to figure out what's going to work for you, right? I divided these into kind of 2 general categories. You have peer connections. So when you do better with other folks in dealing with your emotions. And then there's those that do more like a self-care approach where they want to do it solo by themselves and quiet. And so peer connection options, we have support groups out there. There's diagnosis-based support groups. There's age-based support groups. If you're really lucky, you'll find one that has both. Like there's a young adult leukemia lymphoma group. So they, obviously that's really specific. So you may not get that specific, but you'll have options out there. There's mentor matching organizations and programs where you basically type in a little bit of information and they will match you to a similar survivor or fellow patient, and you will then be connected and be able to talk. So there's really something in that, being able to talk to somebody who gets it, right? Blogs and stories are available on some of the organization's websites that are kind of listed below in this row of logos here. So that's a really important and kind of passive way to find hope or a general feeling of camaraderie by reading somebody else's experience or story. And there's a lot of different websites and things you can go to read young adult stories and blogs. Therapeutic group activities is just basically not necessarily talking about cancer or your feelings, but doing an activity together with your peers that's supposed to be helpful for your emotional health. Individually, obviously there's counseling and then things that I called self-expression. So there's things like journaling that you can do, art therapy, music therapy, depending on your likes and just, what your interests are, what helps you, what's helped you in the past. Those are all really important things to keep in mind. So just really briefly, because I'm probably going to go over on my time anyway, I wanted to kind of mention or show at least some of these really awesome groups and providers that give some really great resources for the community. So Cancer Care Services, like I mentioned a couple times, they also do social gatherings and have a play therapist on site for your family support. Cancer Support Community of North Texas, Victoria did a really good job of talking about their services at the beginning. And like she said, they have Dallas County, Collin County, and Tarrant County locations, wellness activities, and all kinds of things that are available for you and your family. Art Station is in Fort Worth. They offer individual and group art therapy, and they're led by master's or doctorate level art therapists. We actually currently hold a once a month art therapy session at the Joan Katz Cancer Resource Center at Baylor Scott and White All Saints here in Fort Worth. And so it's a really great way, especially if you love art, to kind of let out some emotions. They have a really great way of linking feelings and things to the different activities that we end up and projects that we end up doing in that class. And then while we're speaking about the Joan Katz Cancer Resource Center, I wanted to mention them also. They offer nurse navigation for breast, gynecological, head, neck, lung, heme cancers, other, all kinds of other cancers. So lots of nurse navigation process offerings there, as well as a Shine On program that offers some additional group activities or wellness activities. The entities all the way on the left, so Stupid Cancer, Elephants in Tea, Cactus Cancer Society, those are all young adult specific. Cancer Cactus Society is, there's too many cancer societies, I'm mixing all the words now. Cactus Cancer Society is for those that have been in the world a little bit longer. You may have remembered them as Lacuna Loft. So they're completely virtual and they offer all kinds of awesome group activities like creative writing classes or workshops, book club, journaling classes. They have a lot of things led by a licensed clinical social worker, all kinds of awesomeness. And you really just email in and sign up for things and they will send you a lot of the materials for your activity. They're just really great. All of these places are. Stupid Cancer provides education. So they have like a webinar, basically archive where you can go in and look for things by title. And it shows like a little educational, I almost said sermon, a lecture kind of like this. And they also have meetups and they coordinate CancerCon, which is a young adult cancer conference every year. And it's made for young adult patients, but caregivers can go, AYA-minded healthcare professionals can go. It's a really fun gathering from what I've heard from other folks or patients that have gone. Elephants and Tea is a great organization as well. They got their name because the elephant in the room is cancer and tea is the relief that cancer provides. And so they actually are the only magazine written for and by the AYA community. So they're telling their story in their own words. Like I said, great place to find blogs and stories written by other young adults. They actually just recently helped FWAYA with our organizing and putting on our conference, our Texas AYA conference here in this past February. And they helped graphically design and edit our AYA patient guide, which we'll see a little bit of in a minute, if I have time. So just really briefly, social gatherings I wanted to mention because a lot of young adults may write these off and say they don't need to go to them, or I don't feel like going to them, or what is that going to do for me? It's an opportunity to meet other young adults going through similar circumstances, but in a different and fun environment, right? You're not talking about feelings, you're not talking about cancer. There is not necessarily cancer involved. But you're having fun and you're amongst peers, and there's something therapeutic to that point. So just really briefly, some pictures of things we've done in the past. This was like at a trivia night at Brood, which is a local restaurant. We used to have a annual beer pong tournament without beer necessarily involved per se. We've had a lot of opportunities for young adults to be advocates and speak up and meet and say, be able to help other young adults, and they do that with peers. And then we've had a couple events at Top Golf. And then we had partnered with Sephora at one point in time for their Brave Beauty classes to help put on a makeup class for our young adults to be able to do something fun that involved helping them feel good about themselves. And so we try to keep a creative mind when it comes to what we're offering in terms of FWAYA, but there are other organizations in the community like Rutledge Cancer Foundation, Cancer Care Services. There are entities in Dallas also that have young adult gatherings that are geared towards young adults. So I encourage you to reach out to your social workers and navigators, find out what those things are. Fitness and exercise. So studies have shown that exercise is important when you're getting treated for cancer. Working out can actually help improve your quality of life by increasing your energy, increasing or maintaining your independence, and even help with your ability to deal with your side effects. So we found this especially important in young adults. And, I don't think many people think about it, but working out is a huge part of a lot of young adult lives. We've had I've spoken to a couple of patients, especially on our patient advisory council, and they got diagnosed in high school in the middle of their high school football careers. And so they went from being able to play football to barely being able to walk, and they are no longer able to play with their team, their friends, and so we're talking about this mental impact. When you take away a young adult's ability to work out, it just not only affects their physical health, but if your mental health is affected as well. So I encourage you to reach out and find out where those resources are for you. Moncrief Cancer Institute actually offers in-person and virtual exercise options provided by a certified cancer exercise trainer. And what a certified cancer exercise trainer is somebody who's basically gotten extra training in providing individualized exercise programs for cancer patients. So your training sessions would be specifically tailored for you, whether it's surgical recovery or I'm in treatment and I want to get better at balance because I'm so weak, or you have a specific goal in mind, whatever it might be, they're going to work with you. They're a little bit more familiar with treatment effects and how to exercise, not only while you're experiencing these treatment effects, but maybe how to work out to make sure some of those treatment effects aren't as burdensome as they currently are. All of these programs that I've listed here, and most of the ones if you find anything else, they're going to require your okay from your doctor. Okay, so make sure that you're talking to your doctor before you start anything or do anything physical that in excess of like walking. But I do encourage you to at least investigate your options here. Livestrong is obviously through the Livestrong Foundation, the Lance Armstrong Foundation. They partnered with the YMCA. These are in person at select YMCA locations. There's multiple locations throughout DFW that do this. They had stopped for COVID and have restarted. They are 12 weeks long, and you're getting 2 90-minute sessions a week with that trainer, and they're also free. And then Footsteps for Life is provided through the Cancer Foundation for Life, and sometimes funded by different entities, or helped funded or sponsored by different entities. So they're individual in-person training by appointments. Some of the locations have fitness classes. Some of them may have virtual options. You'll just have to look and see. And They're provided also by certified cancer exercise trainers. And once you qualify for services there, you get them for life. So for the rest of your life, you have free training with Footsteps, which is pretty cool. And I've listed some of the locations there. Just really briefly, I won't go into it too much because we're running out of time. If you ever feel like, whether you're in survivorship or in treatment and feeling up for it, you know, want to go on a trip with peers, these are some of the entities that do that. And I didn't list every entity. There are others. There are other camps, there are other trips, but these are just some of the main ones that came to mind when I was thinking of it. And then to mention that there are also options for your kiddos. Cancer Care Services provides camp care once a year for a week, and Camp Kesem is also for children of patients, and that is, I believe, out of Dallas. I might have misspoken on that. So really quickly, just a little bit more about the organization I work for. They're a coalition per se, and they were called a coalition from the very beginning because it really was a partnership amongst the medical facilities and leaders here in Fort Worth. We exist in the community as well as at Cook Children's because our medical director, Dr. Karen Albertin, was really kind of the spearhead of it all. She basically gathered these doctors and presented to them the AYA issues and said, this is a problem. How do we address it? What are we going to do as a medical community to help these patients get extra services? And thus the idea of FWAYA was born. So we want to provide free or low cost services that are available to young adults no matter where they're being treated. So of course you have myself, who's the navigator, able to educate and provide family with maybe individualized resources, the psychologist for counseling. And then we hope to have a child life specialist and a social worker soon that are going to be obviously specifically for our young adult patients. So those are some of the services that we do, and some lists of these we already talked about. I wanted to briefly discuss our AYA patient guide that we recently, actually maybe within the last, I don't know if it's been 6 months, it was definitely in the last year that this was been published. So Elevance and T, like I mentioned, were our graphic and designers and editors. But basically this book was written by Dr. Albrecht and myself, a couple other folks, that contributors, specialists that were able to put information down. And the idea being that this guide is handed to you when you are diagnosed, because you got diagnosed, and kind of like we just talked about at the beginning of this presentation, what do I do now? Like I'm floating in my ocean and I have no idea what to do. And so this guide was created with that in mind, and it's kind of based off of similar things that are available in Australia for young adults and in the UK. So this is just a snapshot of the table of contents and kind of what our pages may look like. They're meant to be relevant for young adults. They're meant to be you know, something that a young adult might look like and actually want to read, as opposed to our normal looking patient information pamphlets and things like that. And then we wanted it to be very accessible. So it is available online complete in its entirety. You can download it if you wanted printed. The table of contents on the website is clickable, so you can just go straight to the page you want to read about. And it's meant to take you from diagnosis all the way to survivorship with any kinds of issues that may come up. So it's pretty cool. Then just briefly to kind of show you some pictures of our young adult unit. We do have a young adult specific unit at Baylor Scott and White All Saints Medical Center in Fort Worth. It opened up in August of 2016. And so we are there, and it's a 6-bed inpatient unit, and it's meant to kind of, it was built and designed with young adults. AYAs were on the team, AYA loved ones or spouses were on the team. And so all of those minds came together with the architects, with Baylor folks, with, you know, anybody else who might have been there, the AYA specialist, Dr. Albritton. And they just kind of came together and said, these are the things that we need to have happen in this unit for it to be made for young adults. And so that's what they did. And so this is a picture of our common room. So it's meant to be a place where you can hang out with your family and friends. Obviously, COVID changed a lot of that. It's now opening back up, but the idea was that you're meeting with your friends, your young adult, your families are able to come up, your kids, if your kids were there or wanting to come see you. It was a place to provide for you to be able to do that, and also potentially meet other young adults. Sorry, click. these are what the rooms look like. They're larger than your standard hospital room per se. They have more storage. They have a Murphy bed drop down because, you know, we wanted loved ones to be able to have an actual bed to lay in. So they're just, you know, more colorful. There's more natural light maybe than you might see in another room. Our bathrooms have a natural element. One of the main things I hear from young adults on the team, as well as young adults, even now on our patient advisory council. What do you do when you're stressed out? What do you do when you have a bad day? I go for a walk. I just want to be outside. I want to be in nature. I want to, you know, that's where I feel closer to God. That's where I feel calm. So I think that is something that also echoed in the survivors that were on the design team. So we see a lot of nature elements incorporated into our designs. And that's just a picture of some of our bathrooms that are in the shower stalls there that you're looking at. We also have what we call a cocoon room, and it has an area, all of the color boxes you see to the left are filled with books. So it's like a young adult library where you can go get books that's on the unit itself. So you don't have to leave the unit to go into it. It's a quiet space. It's a different four walls than your patient room, as many of you know too well. Sometimes you end up in the hospital for longer than you'd like to be, right? So this kind of provides a little a little area away from your room that you can go to, but still be under nurse monitoring, still potentially have your chemo running, things like that. And there's also a resource wall on the side you can't see where we have like pamphlets and things for some of the organizations that I spoke of earlier. Really briefly, we're just talking about things that are coming up. It is AYA Awareness Week, like Victoria mentioned. So we're very proud and excited to be hosting some events this week in honor of our young adults and to help provide some of those social gathering opportunities we talked about. So tonight we have trivia at Funky Picnic. We have breakfast and Ben's yoga at Clear Fork on Saturday. And so if you want more information, please feel free to reach out. If you want to register, we still have spots open for all of the above. Would love to see anybody there. This is open to providers and staff as well. Just a little bit of some of our up and coming things. Young Adult Cancer Support Group this month is actually on the 21st of this month. And just to mention briefly, we do provide a support group monthly through FWAYA. That is virtual on Zoom right now. So that is something that you can look into if you're one of those peer support people. And that's a young adult specific. So it's everybody in that age group that has cancer of some kind or has had it and is under 40 years old. And then Camp Gold is a really great event that happens annually now, thankfully, thanks to the Rutledge Cancer Foundation and Cancer Care Services. Camp Gold, it's an overnight stay for young adults, and they can bring a +1. You can bring your husband, you can bring a friend, you can bring a sibling, and you're just able to do this really cool agenda of you know, outdoor type activities kind of combined and intertwined with some therapeutic activities. And so it's a really great opportunity to do something fun. Everybody that I've had that has gone to it has loved it. And so I encourage you to look out. That's coming up on April 23rd and 24th at Camp Carter. And so please reach out to your navigator or social worker or me if you want to get connected to that. And this is my contact information. For those of you that don't have it, if you would like to write that down, keep it, you know, or if you don't have to, you know, you don't want to write it down right now, your support staff will probably know how to get a hold of me at any point in time. I'm available. So like I said, I work out of Baylor All Saints in Fort Worth, but I'm not tied to Baylor. I can't, you know, I can see patients outside of Baylor as well because of my unique position with FWAYA. So just because you're not getting treatment in Fort Worth or at Baylor doesn't mean that I can't potentially reach out and give you resources for young adult specific for you and your family. So that's all I got. Sorry, I went over time a little bit, Victoria.